Good morning from Franklin Square Community Church in Latonia, Ohio. Today we are down in the fellowship hall. We are on week 4 of the 52 Weeks Through the Bible by John MacArthur. This week is God is Always Faithful. The reading for this week will be Deuteronomy 1 through 34. Shortly after their exodus from Egypt, the Israelites had followed God's visible presence to the land he had reserved for them, a land flowing with milk and honey. Yet in spite of the miracles they had witnessed God perform, they refused to enter their new home. They were afraid of the Canaanite, a warlike people who occupied the promised land at that time. In rejecting God's plan, the Israelites rejected God himself. As a result, God commanded them to wander as nomads in the wilderness for 40 years, during which time the generation that had rejected God died. Under Moses' guidance, the new generation of Israelites prepared for when God would once again present the land promised to them. As part of this preparation, Moses, in the last few weeks of his life, committed a series of speeches to writing and gave them to the priests and the elders. Deuteronomy recorded these explanations from Moses about the law and its implications for the new generation as they prepared to enter the promised land. These words bring into focus all that was revealed in Genesis to Numbers, thus completing the 5-part literary unit known as Pentateuch. Like Leviticus, the events of Deuteronomy take place in one location in the span of about 1 month's time. Now, however, the Israelites were camped east of the Jordan River across from Jericho. Moses could have taken many tacks in these final words to the people of Israel, yet he chose to begin with their recent history. Specifically, he began with their moment of greatest transgression and shame, their refusal to obey God's command to go in and possess the land he had promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Moses wanted to burn that moment into the people's collective memory, not to punish them, but so they would avoid repeating the same sinful pattern in the future. He also desired to warn the people about the future dangers they would face in the land of Canaan, foremost of which was idolatry, and called for them to focus on obeying God's commands. Moses' second address in Deuteronomy stretches from the end of chapter 4 through chapter 28. He gave the Israelites a clear understanding of their covenant with God. This included several commands and methods designed to help parents teach their children what it meant to live in covenant with God. Moses' initial instruction for worshiping God was perhaps most shocking. The Israelites were to utterly destroy all the false places of worship throughout Canaan when they possessed the land. This was a reminder that God's people were to have no connection with pagan practices. In the instructions to the future kings of Israel, each was required to literally handwrite a copy of the law and to read it all the days of their life. Why? So they would learn to fear the Lord. Moses also prophesied about a future prophet whom we know as the Messiah, Jesus Christ. According to Moses, this prophet would speak with God's voice and display the same power and authority that God displayed at Mount Horeb, Sinai, when the Israelites shook with fear. Through Moses, God further prescribed a powerful ceremony to be carried out as soon as the Israelites crossed the Jordan River. They were to set up huge stones, paint them white, and write on them all the words of the law, which likely meant the entire book of Deuteronomy. Only when this was done were the people to build an altar, make sacrifices to God, and celebrate together. In the conclusion of Moses' second address to the Israelites, he detailed all the blessings the people would receive if they remained faithful to God as they inhabited Canaan. He also laid out the curses they would incur if they rebelled as their ancestors had. To dramatically demonstrate this, God commanded that representatives of Israel's 12 tribes climb 2 mountains within their new homeland. One group would shout the blessings. The other group would shout the curses. Moses' third and final address reaffirmed the covenant between God and the generation of Israel entering the land. It differed from others in that it was written in the form of a song. Even as Moses called that generation to covenant faithfulness, he understood they would not uphold their part of the agreement. Future generations would turn away from God, repeating the sins of the past. Yet, in spite of Israel's coming rebellion, Moses still looked toward the future with hope. He counted on the time when God would establish yet another covenant with his people. A new covenant marked not by physical circumcision, but by circumcision of the heart. One of Moses' final tasks was passing the torch of leadership to Joshua, Moses' personal assistant and leader of Israel's armies during the wilderness years, would bring God's people to their new home. Finally, having led the Israelites far more than 40 years, and after a lifespan of 120 years, God gave Moses a view of the promised land from Mount Nebo and then called his faithful servant home. The final 2 chapters of Deuteronomy were likely written by Joshua, as they record the events immediately before and after Moses' death. These chapters reinforce the primary themes that Moses had covered. God is always faithful to his chosen. He is sovereign, and he alone is God. The Lord went to incredible lengths to stress to his people the critical importance of personal holiness at the very beginning of their journey to the promised land. Moses, at the end of his life, called that same people to reject the mistakes they had made in their history and choose a better future, one of life rather than death, and blessing rather than curse. Reflections on Deuteronomy. Trust and obey. Much of what Moses communicated to the Israelites can be boiled down to one central idea: trust in the Lord. The previous generation had failed to make this choice to trust God because they were terrified of the strength of the Canaanites. So Moses was setting the same choice before this generation. He was also reminding them why they could trust God: because of his character. Choose blessings over curses. Moses' word in Deuteronomy 28 are filled with stark contrasts. The first 14 verses describe the blessings Israel would receive if they remained faithful to God. The remaining 54 verses describe the curses that would fall on them if they were unfaithful to him. People today have been presented with the same options. Those who obey the Lord will be blessed, while those who disregard his truths will suffer the consequences of disobedience, both in this life and for all eternity. Blessings for obedience and cursings for rebellion is a truth that flows from God's justice. God is faithful. Moses began Deuteronomy by detailing the failure of Israel's past generations when they refused to obey God and enter the promised land. He ended with a song that highlighted the same theme. In both cases, Moses pointedly called the Israelites attending to God's faithfulness. Despite their repeated transgressions, God had been faithful to them. He is always faithful to his chosen ones. So your study questions for this week are: 1, why was it important for Moses to recount the Israelite people's history to them? What did Moses say had caused Israel to rebel against God? 2, how had God shown his faithfulness to his people when it came to helping them overcome threats from the nations around them? 3, what did God identify to his people as being the greatest commandment? What were the Israelites to never forget? 4, Moses prophesied about Jesus in Deuteronomy 18:15 through 22. How might the promise of a coming Messiah have helped guard the Israelites from failing into old sinful patterns? 5, what purpose did the stones in the altar described in Deuteronomy 27:1 through 10 serve? What were some of the key principles in the covenant that Moses described in Deuteronomy 29? 6. How did Moses assure the people in Deuteronomy 31 that God would be with Joshua as their new leader? How did they think the people reacted? How do you think the people reacted when Moses gave them this news? 7. What key themes are present throughout Moses' blessing over Israel in Deuteronomy 33? How many leaders are mentioned in this particular blessing? And finally, number 8. How is Moses' death described in Deuteronomy 34? What do the closing words of the book say about the legacy that Moses left behind to the people of Israel? Okay. Again, it is week 4. Our readings for this week are Deuteronomy 1 through 34. If this is something you would like me to read daily, you're each reading, comment in the video that you would like to see the video reading live. Thank you. God bless from Franklin Square Community Church. Have a blessed week.